it's random how this happens, because I didn't know anything about this. I had no idea that there was an increase in shootings. I was learning that all from Paul Joseph Watson, and then I also learned from Paul Joseph Watson that it's, again, because of the fact that black and brown people just kill more than regular people, and so that's the reason. But it turns out that in the analysis obtained by the New York Times, the state's new bail law and the mass release of inmates had no role in the spike in shootings. We haven't done a Paul Joseph Watson in a long time, and for good reason. He's very grating. He's hard to sit through. But this is a new one, and this is Paul Joseph Watson talking shit about New York. And as someone who's got a deep love for both the state and the city of New York, it's a wonderful place. Have I said that I've lived there for 5 months, so I know what it's like to be a New Yorker? That's all it takes. After 5 months, you indoctrinated into the city. But no, in all seriousness, New York is such an amazing area. It's like, it's unadulterated strange. I love it. Like, just every single day, if you ride the subway, you will see things like maybe 4 or 5 productions that you wouldn't have seen anywhere else. And that's just in the subway ride. That's just on your way to work. You'll see people dancing and singing. You'll get a couple sermons. I got a lot of sermons. I learned about why I was like, the sin, Satan's ass or something to that effect. At either rate, unbelievably entertaining. And I'd love to learn why it's a shithole country. I'm going to guess it has something to do with immigrants.
420,000 New Yorkers moved out of the city between March 1st and May 1st. Between May and July, there was a 95% year-on-year increase in people expressing interest in moving out of Manhattan. And according to Governor Andrew Cuomo, it looks like most who fled from COVID aren't coming back.
I am also witnessing many of my friends leaving. These are basically upper middle class and wealthy people. They're the tax base of the city.
Given that the wealthy 1% pay half of the state's taxes, that leaves a huge financial black hole. It's starting to look like the dark days of the 1970s are on their way back.
Once considered the safest big city in America, crime is now rising dramatically.
All our friends are moving out as well.
We're also really missing the city that we had, and that's not the city that it is at the moment.
Perhaps the most draconian coronavirus lockdown in America is a major factor for the exodus, but it's not the only one. Why is the Big Apple going rotten?
Well, I mean, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and I was actually right to do so, because I was like, I hope he understands that COVID's been the big reason why since March 1st there's been an enormous amount of people leaving New York, and a big problem being is that first-line workers are the ones who are most exposed. It's a very high-populated state. It's a very high-populated city, concentrated a huge amount of people into a small amount of areas. They all have to fit inside subways to get to work every single day. Yeah, the virus was going to spread, unfortunately, very, very rapidly there. That's one of the reasons.
Well, prepare to be shocked, because it turns out that emptying all the prisons of criminals leads to an increase in crime. I know, I couldn't believe it either, but it's true. Citing the threat of COVID-19, Mayor de Blasio set free 2,000 prisoners. 50 of the first 1,500 to be released were quickly rearrested. One of those was a rapist who tried to rape again. Another was a convicted murderer who tried to rob a bank. Citing the fact that there's plenty of space in New York's jails for social distancing, the New York Post editorial board even accused de Blasio of, quote, letting folks out for ideological reasons and public safety be damned. In the same week that shootings surged 277%, de Blasio had the nerve to get on television and celebrate New York's record low prison population.
We now have fewer people in our jails than any time since World War II. And we are safer for it.
Safer for it? Is that some kind of sick joke?
People said that if we reduced incarceration and ended the era of mass incarceration, we would be endangered. It was the other way around.
No, it wasn't. Compared to the same month last year, overall shootings for July have spiked 177%. Murders are up 59%. Burglaries are up 31%. Between Thursday and Saturday last week, 49 people were shot in a 48-hour period. That's 5 times more than the same period last year. That rivals Chicago levels.
President Trump is hinting at a possible federal intervention after another surge in shootings across New York City.
A 7-year-old girl was wounded, and a 19-year-old woman was
so
murdered.
And we are safer for it.
There have been 1,087 shooting victims so far in 2020. That's compared to 577 for for the same period last year.
A 40-year-old man was shot while waiting for his train on the platform at Grand Central Terminal. Cops released this video of the suspected gunman. 50 shootings in the past 48 hours, with gun violence in New York continuing to rage on with no end in sight.
And we are safer for it.
On Tuesday night, 9 more people were shot in 5 separate incidents across Queens, Brooklyn, and Manhattan in a matter of hours.
And we are safer for it.
Residents are panic buying bulletproof vests. Midtown dealer Brad Padell says sales of body armor are up 80%. He told the New York Post, quote, "You wouldn't believe the people who call up and say, I'm scared." And how did Governor Cuomo react to all this? By blaming the police.
Denial is not a successful life strategy.
By blaming the same NYPD that he and de Blasio have trashed, undermined, stripped of power, and defunded.
You cannot dismiss these numbers. Over 90% of the victims are black and brown.
Yeah, I wonder why 90% of the victims are black and brown. Could it possibly be because they're all shooting each other? Could it possibly be because your mate de Blasio let them all out of jail?
And we are safer for it.
And none of...
There it is. Well, I was waiting, I was like, he hasn't really ramped up the extreme racism yet, but there it is. I am a little bit curious as to why that's had such a huge increase, though. In the past few weeks, Mayor de Blasio and his police commissioner, Dermot F. Shea, have tied the steep rise in shootings in New York to a breakdown in the criminal justice system, and they continued to contend that it allowed criminals back out on the streets. The mayor and the commissioner have cited a range of causes that they portrayed out of the control: the pandemic, the George Floyd protests, the measures approved by the state legislator. But by a confidential analysis of police data conducted by city officials but not released to the public, it offers little, if any, evidence to back up their claims. In fact, the analysis obtained by the New York Times suggests that the state's new bail law and the mass release of inmates from the city's jail in recent months because of the coronavirus outbreak played no role in the spike in shootings. Whoa, what's that? It's random how this happens, because I didn't know anything about this. I had no idea that there was an increase in shootings. I was learning that all from Paul Joseph Watson, and then I also learned from Paul Joseph Watson that it's, again, because of the fact that black and brown people just kill more than regular people, and so that's the reason. But it turns out that in the analysis obtained by the New York Times, the state's new bail law and the mass release of inmates had no role in the spike in shootings. Of the 1,500 inmates let out of Rikers from March 16th to April 30th, only 7 had been rearrested on weapons charges by mid-July, according to a confidential analysis. Only 7 of the 1,500 inmates. See, I would not expect it to be that low, and I'm just saying, that's ridiculous to me. I would consider the recidivism rates to be much higher. That would make a lot more sense. Especially, again, there was no program in place that after you were all released from prison, we're now going to help get you jobs. We're now going to help get you education. Like, that would be essential in my mind. You can't just release 2,000 inmates and then hope that nothing will happen, right? You have to release 2,000 inmates and then also assist them in getting back on their feet. Nearly 2,000 people who in July had open gun cases were allowed to go home to await trial, but only 40 of those defendants were arrested on weapon charges. Instead, the analysis points to a different possible reason for this wave of shootings. The number of arrests for gun crimes has plummeted. While murders and shootings have surged, reports of other major crimes have actually fallen in recent months. Still, the spike in gun violence has stirred deep fears that the city might be sliding back into an era of random violence on the street. Recent shooting victims have included 2 teenagers going to play basketball and a baby boy. New York City is not alone. Shootings have skyrocketed in major cities across the country, and that surge has led to intense political fights over whether the effort to rein in the police, including to fund the police movement, touched off by the killing of George Floyd, are playing a role. On Sunday, well, yeah, but they haven't done it. It's not like the police, that they're not getting... You can't start blaming the things that haven't happened yet. You can't be like, well, this probably has a lot to do with Black Lives Matter and a lot to do with defunding the police. It's like, oh, did we defund the police? No, we haven't. We haven't done that. So... I mean, imagine my shock. On Sunday, another 19 people were shot in New York City, one fatally. Until the first 7 months of the year, shootings were up 72% over the same period. Murders rose 30%, even as reporters of other violent crimes like rape, assault, and robbery fell. The police say feuds between street gangs are behind most of the incidents, and so far detectives have been unable to make enough arrests to stop the reprisals. The pandemic and the need to divert investigators to cover widespread protests have set back investigations, police officials are saying. Interesting.
When compared to the same period last year, Manhattan's Upper East Side has seen a 286% increase in robberies. And those thinking they can escape all this by fleeing to the Upper West Side, well, they can think again.
So when poor people commit crimes, it's because they're poor. That's why they commit crimes. Like, people don't decide suddenly, I'm going to commit crimes today because I want to be cool and commit crimes. It's because I need to, because again, I'm poor. So it's inequity that's causing the crimes. And typically, they'll steal from whatever they can. And if they're going to go to the rich part of town, Manhattan, they're probably going to steal from there. So it doesn't change the fact that Manhattan is filled with rich people as to whether or not people are going to try and steal from the rich people. That doesn't change that dynamic.
Become a dumping ground for hundreds of homeless people who the city has put up in luxury hotels in an attempt to keep shelters clear of COVID-19. 139 of the city's iconic hotels have been turned over to help house these most unwelcome neighbours. The city and FEMA is paying $175 per day per person.
In Times Square, seemingly homeless people are sprawled out where pedestrians would typically walk and gather. She recently took these pictures of a needle and what appears to be a bag of heroin.
There are people defecating on the streets. There are people selling drugs on the streets. There are people using telephone booths as their office. I mean, it's incredible what's going on.
Now, it would be snobbish and condescending for the wealthy to assume that they could live in a major city without witnessing homelessness.
Why don't you get a job?
But the city got caught housing registered sex offenders just a block away from a children's playground. Residents say they're living in fear of homeless people being aggressively intimidating, spitting at them, verbally abusing them, doing drugs, masturbating in the open, and urinating on the street.
Urinating. Again, these people don't actually care about solving any of these problems, though. I mean, they'll tell you, like, well, we just need to increase policing and we need to arrest them all, and then we can arrest all the homeless, and that'll solve the homeless problem. It doesn't. I mean, if you're actually aggressively looking to solve these problems, why don't you look at what's worked or what does work in this? And again, the cause of crime is poverty. That's it. So if we start to try and reduce poverty through a whole bunch of things, such as, why don't we give them housing? You will see the rates of crime go down, because that's what happens in other parts of the world where they do that. So look to the examples that work and then emulate them and then try to make them better.
They'll start self-pleasurizing themselves. They'll pass out on the street from K2.
Ooh, RT.
Smoking crack.
Interesting. Does Paul Joseph Watson often use RT as a source? Probably only when it benefits his narrative. I'm going to guess.
There's anger and disbelief that with cold weather around the corner and restaurants struggling, Mayor de Blasio has no plans to allow indoor dining in New York City.
I'm petrified.
So the cops are not responding now at all. You call 911 and say, you want to defund us? Okay, now you'll see what it's like without cops.
Maybe the police would have more manpower and resources to deal with this. If, for example, de Blasio didn't devote 27 of them to guard a Black Lives Matter mural outside Trump Tower. A sizable work crew, including de Blasio himself, were allowed to violate permit rules and gather in close proximity to paint the mural. Yet the 9/11 Light Beam Memorial Tribute has been cancelled for the first time in 18 years because of the threat posed by coronavirus to the work crew. Once again, so long as your message is ardently anti-police, anti-American, and pro-BLM, apparently COVID suddenly mutates into a woke virus and takes a vacation. The message is patently ludicrous. Oh, you can't get corona at a BLM rally attended by tens of thousands of people.
Deco, they literally have cops that go around with those 16-person vans and wake people up in the middle of the night and tell them to move or go to jail. It happened to me a bunch of times when we had nowhere to go. Fuck me, that's terrible. That's awful.
But if you visit a light show, you're killing Granny. And remember, these are the same health officials who, at the start of the pandemic, told people to go out and congregate in huge crowds. Commissioner Dave Toxey told New Yorkers to ignore, quote, misinformation about corona and to go out and mingle with thousands of others to celebrate Chinese Lunar New Year. Mark D. Levine praised crowds for defying coronavirus by gathering in huge numbers. And as late as March, de Blasio himself was broadcasting the same message. Cuomo also forced nursing homes to take in COVID-infected patients, leading to over 10,000 deaths. So it's pretty rich of the same people who did all that to be lecturing us about COVID now.
And we are safer for it.
Denial is not a successful life strategy.
New York City's crime wave has also been exacerbated by violent Black Lives Matter protests. And yet Mayor de Blasio has caved to BLM at every available opportunity. Despite criminals becoming more emboldened and violence spiraling out of control, de Blasio submitted to Black Lives Matter demands to defund the
I don't know who this appeals to. I don't get it. I don't know, like, are you that, like, this obviously makes people angrier because, like, I have to listen to Paul Joseph Watson yelling at me. It's just like I find this incredibly grating, and I despise him. I can't imagine enjoying him. I don't know.
Most of the attractions are shut down. And even if you do get there, you're treated like a leper. JCPenney and Neiman Marcus have both filed for bankruptcy. The Subway food chain has closed dozens of its locations in New York City in recent months. Le Pain Quotidien has also been forced to close several stores, saying there's just nowhere near enough people on the streets. According to reality TV star Jonathan Cheban, who was recently robbed at gunpoint, it's now traumatic to be in New York. When most middle-class and wealthy people can work remotely, what's the point in staying in a crime-ridden big city? And that's why New York property prices are beginning to plummet.
This year, we are seeing record declines. The number of new leases falling 23% over last year. Median rents with the largest decline.
You gotta love this, eh? New York City's apartment problem. Vacancies hit an all-time high in Manhattan. I wonder why. Just no way of knowing. Wow.
There are now over 13,000 apartments in Manhattan that are up for rent. That is an all-time high and more than double last year's total.
There's a glut of supply because of COVID and people trying to flee, but no real demand. Look at this video of Fifth Avenue, boarded up shops near deserted streets. Far from its reputation as one of the most elegant and prosperous thoroughfares in the world, it's now said to resemble a demilitarized zone. It now looks like something closer to the city portrayed in the dystopian movie Escape from New York, which is kind of ironic because that's precisely what everyone's doing.
In 1988, the crime rate in the United States rises 400%. The once great city of New York becomes the one maximum security prison for the entire country. The rules are simple. Once you go in, you don't come out.
It feels like the 1970s, one local community board member told the New York Post. Everyone who can move out is moving out. Governor Cuomo pleaded with New Yorkers who have left the city to come back. He even promised to cook them dinner.
You gotta come back. When are you coming back? We'll go to dinner. I'll buy you a drink. Come over, I'll cook.
Come back to what? A crime-ridden, trash-strewn, decaying, violent, lawless, leftist shithole.
You gotta come back.
Yeah, I don't think the prospect of a Manhattan clam chowder or a thin-crust pizza is going to be much of a temptation, thanks to the destitute.
I love that they're blaming this all on, like, all these radical socialist communists that have done this and destroyed America. Like, and in every case, it's like, yeah, it's the Republicans who are usually in power, or the Democrats. It's never been anything close to even like a sock dem government. We don't even get that. But yes, no, of course, you want to return America to when it was much better, pure, white, Aryan, like the driven snow.
Constitution of the 1970s, New York was once known as Fear City, thanks to Cuomo, de Blasio, and the rest of the progressive mob running New York into the ground in 2020. And in the absence of a Rudy Giuliani to clean the place up, those same fears are now making a rapacious comeback.
The mayor of New York City, he's killing the city.
It's almost like Rudy Giuliani's policy of just locking up and executing the homeless didn't work. It didn't do anything. In fact, it doesn't solve any of the problems underlying society. I mean, you could let all the homeless people just die, and there's going to be new ones, because again, it's poverty that causes crime, and not the other way around.
And he's an idiot.
Oh shit! Summit news. Oh yeah, someone got a template.
To our God, I'm Ra. We pray at your altar of awesomeness. To our monarch, Thomas Bone, you are the light that guides our path. To our lords, Jeffrey Lamb, Steven, Ninetails Cosmic Fox, Hans Josephine, and Poppy Nelson, we bow meekly for your pleasure. To our Knights of the Round Table, Josh Mickelson, Dylan Bite, Alexander Thaler, Zach Christensen, Todd Buckingham, Todd Lajeunesse, Clement Chutzkoff, Godbear Games, Moss Beast, Political Puppy, Ali Menthol, Jimmy Big Nuts, Alan R., Andreas Chitoro, Good Poon Hates Cops, That's Solid Poon Man, and Bryn, we salute you. And to our many merchants and farmers, you have our undying love